there were people who got angry with William Upshaw because he would be running down the aisles of Congress and his crutch wouldn't even touch the floor. And they said, well, what do you need these things for? And well, there's one article, and I'll try to find it as well, but they were mentioning that, with the modern inventions of I think it's back then, the whalebone brace or something like this, with a proper brace on his leg, he doesn't even need, had he had the injury that was still afflicting him, which there's big question, he wouldn't have even needed that with the brace. But at minimum, he was running, and at, the very obvious flaw here is that he was using a crutch and getting around until Davis brings him to William Branham's Healing Revival. Then Davis, apparently, according to Branham, sits him in a wheelchair and wheels him up to the chair, and Branham says something to the effect that this man has been in beds and in wheeled chairs for 66 years, and God lifted him out in my ministry. And there were a large number of people there sitting in the crowd who said, oh, wow, this happened because I watched it happen. But there were also, Charles, there had to have been people there that knew Upshaw. Upshaw was very famous, very connected in the American Christianity, fundamentalist side of Christianity. They had to have known that this man had already been out of a wheelchair.
I know. It's something else how William Branham exaggerated that miracle. William Branham had us believe that this was a man who had been basically crippled for 50 years and was raised up out of a wheelchair. He didn't tell us that he already was able to walk with a cane for the past 50 years.
Yeah.
Come on. What about that? So anyway, there's a number of other William Branham quotes that put him together with Roy Davis at revival meetings in the 1950s. And I'm not going to read them all, but I will just give one more. So this will be a third example of Roy Davis with William Branham in the 1950s. And I'll read this quote. This is from a 1953 sermon I will restore. William Branham said, "When Dr. Davis had ordained me into the Baptist Church," so that would have been about 1930. When Dr. Davis ordained me into the Baptist Church, about 1930, when he stood there a few nights with "here some time ago," now he's talking about something else, "here some time ago in a religious meeting," he said, "Now, Brother Branham, I'll have you speak for us tonight." That did me good. When he told me, said, "I went up to Green's Mill that night when the angel of the Lord appeared to me." Okay, so here, what are they talking about? William Branham is talking about the 1947 Angelic Commission story here. So we're dating this. Roy Davis and William Branham here are talking about the Angelic Commission together. And he told me, said, and I went to the doctors and he said, "You mean to tell me that with your 7th grade education, you are going to pray for potentates and monarchs?" Okay. So that quote puts William Branham and Roy Davis having a conversation at a revival meeting sometime after the 1947 Angelic Commission story, right? So this revival would put William Branham together with Roy Davis somewhere in the late 40s, early 50s, right? And again, quotes like this, you got to read them carefully, but this shocks me. Because again, just like the Upshaw healing or the Voice of Healing article, William Branham definitely knew who and what Roy Davis was by this point, okay? He knows who and what Roy Davis is beyond a shadow of a doubt at this point in time. And William Branham is voluntarily choosing to partner with the man and voluntarily choose to give him public praise and recognition, voluntarily choosing to share the platform with him, right? Knowing full well that Roy Davis is a sex pervert, child molester, thief, kidnapper, right? William Branham knew all of that about Roy Davis, yet he is still working with them. And we can find quote after quote after quote that puts them together, even in the 50s, okay? And there is just no excuse for that. None whatsoever. But, this is just par for the course for William Branham.
Right, and I think we've covered this in some of the prior episodes, but understanding the denomination of faith that would become the message is also critical to understanding Davis, because Roy Davis had been kicked out of several church denominations. He was a Baptist until he was caught as a bigamist. He was a Pentecostal. He was a Church of God guy until he got caught with frauds, thefts, sex with underage girls, all kinds of different crimes that this man got caught with. And so these churches kicked him out, and he can never return. But he's still so famous because of his white supremacy that he can easily hold a revival, and people will still come to it in the South, it's very interesting, Charles. But Davis got kicked out of these organizations, and so he said, I'm going to create my own. I'm going to create the Pentecostal Baptist Church of God sect. And I'm going to say, I can be all of you guys. Even though you kicked me out, I can be you. And William Branham is adopted into this. He's ordained into this. And Davis creates his headquarters in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and starts planting all of these churches back in the early 30s. So William Branham is touring with that denomination as early as 1928 or 9, I think we've placed it. Then he becomes a bishop in it, and Davis starts planting other churches. Branham becomes one of the first church plants that we've identified is, or one of the early ones, I should say, not the earliest, is the Milltown, Indiana church, which was a sister church of the Tabernacle. It was one of these things, Pentecostal Baptist Church of God sect. Well, 1953, this is after the Voice of Healing and Latter Rain movements merged and then split. And then William Branham is starting to be snubbed by Gordon Lindsay. Branham is holding in, I think it's Hammond, Indiana, or Connorsville, Indiana, a Pentecostal Baptist revival. And that is this sect. And that is very critical in understanding because at this point of time, the message was in its early stages of being birthed. So William Branham is still at minimum, a speaker, but he was a bishop in this sect. And the sect just kind of dissolved and disappeared. Well, when it disappeared, the message appeared. So it's as though, like white supremacy shrouded in secrecy, it's as though the sect kind of morphed from what it was into what became the message cult of personality. Well, Roy Davis was I don't know what you call him, he was the pope of this organization.
Right. When Roy Davis went to prison and William Branham took over the headquarters church congregation in Jeffersonville, it's also very clear as you look at the newspapers, he's still touring like the circuit around here of churches that Roy Davis had started all the way back in the 30s and into the 40s. So, he was still involved as some sort of an overseer, bishop type character